Today I wanted to do a bit of a catch-up video, really. It's been, I think, about 7 months since my autism diagnosis, which is a bit mad, really. It doesn't seem that long at all, but yeah, it's still really strange in many ways. I think some days I think, really, I'm autistic? Did they get that right? Surely somebody would have pointed it out at a much earlier point in my life. Perhaps I should have realised a lot earlier that I was autistic, and all these kinds of thoughts that enter my head. But I guess I'm just in a place where I'm really grateful to at least now know that I'm autistic. It would have been helpful to know a lot earlier, but a diagnosis is a privilege. So many people are out there, autistic people, not even having a clue that they're autistic and still struggling in their lives. And at least for me, I have this information, and it really is helping me to reframe so much about my life, really. So I think with any kind of major change that goes on in our life, it's really common to go through a grief process, really, and certainly that's something that's resonated with me. I can't help but feel that things might have been a lot different, or would have been a lot different, had I had a diagnosis in childhood or even in my teenage years. And I just get kind of really frustrated at times to think of all the challenges that I've had and how things could have looked very different for me had I realised that I had this difference, and had I had the support around me to allow me to thrive, really. I think it's difficult enough for autistic people to survive out there, given our challenges in a neurotypical world, or a world that's designed for neurotypical people. But to thrive is such a rare thing for autistic people. And of course, alongside going through all these stages of grief comes imposter syndrome, and this is so common, isn't it? I don't believe that a person could have a diagnosis of autism or realise that they're autistic later in life without going through some kind of imposter syndrome kind of scenario, because we've coped so long, haven't we, without having this information, that suddenly to have this whole new identity in many ways, I don't know, I just feel like sometimes I don't deserve it. I've coped this far, I've been able to go off and work, I've been able to go to university or art school, and many people can't. So who am I to say that I'm autistic when other people are more deserving of being called autistic or being described as autistic? And of course, it's just madness, isn't it? It's very clear when I actually think about it that I am autistic because I've had all of these challenges in life. I've struggled with work. I just made a video about how I've had 50 plus jobs in my life. I struggled with education. I had to actually go back to education in my 30s because I just couldn't do it the first time around. And socially, my life's been a disaster in many stages of my life. And I think imposter syndrome is just such a normal process to go through. I've had imposter syndrome as an artist as well. It's just not feeling sure of yourself. That's all that's about, really. So above all, I think having the diagnosis is helping me just make sense of so much, really. And it's really helping me to reframe all of these things. And I don't know if you're like me, but I'll often have thoughts enter my head where, it would just present me with something that I did that was embarrassing, or when I've not understood anything, or when I've just been really awkward. And finally, I've now got this thing where I can, challenge these thoughts with, you are autistic, you are autistic, and this is what happens when autistic people are living in a world that's not designed for them. And I think because of that, I'm definitely feeling less guilt about perhaps how I've come across to people, or even how I've treated people sometimes, because I'm autistic. I think the one thing that I'm finding interesting though is that I think this is a bit of a phenomenon really, but since my diagnosis, I'm feeling more autistic, if anything. Like, for instance, my noise sensitivity now is through the roof, and I'm very aware of traffic outside as I'm speaking to you. We've also had a new neighbour move in quite recently, and he was really quiet for the first few months, so we thought we'd landed on our feet, but I don't know whether he's got a new music system or whatever, but he's yeah, over the last few weeks suddenly started playing like Ibiza style kind of chill beats music, which I hate. And it's like a sort of heartbeat noise coming through the walls, and we can really hear it in the front room where we watch TV, and it's all that I can think about whenever it's playing. I can't concentrate on anything, the TV or whatever, and I'm just kind of sat there fuming, and it's such an anxiety inducing thing really, because even the evenings where he's not playing music, I'm anticipating that music coming on all the time. And I've always been a bit like this, but now it's really kind of all consuming, and I hate it, if I'm honest. I hate being like this. I think what I'm going to have to do is assess the situation and just keep a log of what he's doing, and perhaps raise a complaint at some stage. But at the moment now, Ian and I have discussed it, and we're just going to play it by ear really, because he knows that if I speak to this guy, I will lose my temper really easily. So yeah, it's so difficult dealing with other people, isn't it? And also my routines are, yeah, just so finely tuned now, and I get really frustrated if I can't just do my own thing every day. And yeah, just so many of my traits are just way more pronounced now, and I don't know if that just would have happened anyway. I think since perimenopause, I've spoken about this in a different video, I noticed that a lot of my traits were just really revealing themselves. I think they've always been there, certainly, but it's like turning them up to 11 at times, it's, yeah, really kind of all consuming. And I think because of this, although I really try and be positive about my autism diagnosis, and I do try and see it as a difference and not a disability, I think some days I can't help but think of it as a disability, because it really does feel like that. I just really struggle in so many areas, and I think because it's combined in my case with MCAS and POTS, I just can't lead a normal life. And although I've resigned myself to this in many ways, it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating that I can't lead a normal life, and I do feel disabled at times. I think hopefully as time goes on, I will see it as just a difference. I'm just different from other people, but it's called a disability for a reason really, and it's good to remember that at times. Post-diagnosis, or post-realising that you're autistic, is a time when we think about disclosing to others as well, don't we? And I guess I'm in a kind of unique, and dare I say fortunate position, although I'm in many ways disabled because I'm home-based. I don't see other people very often, so I'm not actually in a situation where I have to tell people that I'm autistic very often. I think I've only actually told one person in person, and it was one of Ian's friends that had come over a little while ago. He and his wife live in another country, but we just went out for a walk with them, and I just kind of mentioned it off the cuff, and his response was perfect. He just barely even registered the fact that I'd said I was autistic, and I found that just brilliant. And that's the kind of response that I'm super happy with. But I'll certainly be very choosy about who I tell as time goes on, because I don't want to be faced with all the kind of tropes that, you know, you don't look autistic, you've done all this in your life, you can't be autistic. I don't want to hear it, to be honest. And the other two people that I disclosed to were people that I didn't know. There were two older ladies looking for directions kind of locally to me, and I often hate being asked directions, and I can really understand why now, because if I'm just suddenly confronted with somebody who wants this information from me, it's like a bit of a shock to the system, and I immediately have to ground myself and have to think, okay, I'm in this situation now, so I have to think where I am, where they want to get to. I then have to think about the various different ways to get to that destination, and then I have to process which is not the easiest to get to, but the easiest to explain. So in this situation, my immediate thought process came to mind: where am I? What am I doing? But I said to these ladies, I'm autistic, just give me a moment and I'll think about where you need to go. And it allowed me space just to think about what I needed to do, really. But their reaction was quite interesting, because they looked a bit confused, I have to say. And when I'd given them the information that they needed, so I'd given them clear directions of how to get somewhere, they kind of hovered around for a little bit after I left, I noticed. And I did think, are they going to ask somebody else as well? Because I said I was autistic. I don't know, that just could be me projecting that onto them. They may have been just collecting their thoughts themselves, but yeah, it was certainly a thought process that I had. And another thing that we think about in terms of getting a diagnosis or realising that you're autistic, and it's unmasking. And gosh, how do you unmask in middle age is the question. I've lived like this for 50 years. How do I suddenly now unmask? Is it possible? Who knows? I think the only thing that I can say about this really is that because Ian and I, my partner, know each other so well, I've been completely unmasked around him for about 15 years. You know, maybe the first couple of years you kind of present perhaps a heightened version of yourself, perhaps, but yeah, certainly for about 15 years I've been absolutely myself around him, and that in itself has been amazing. I didn't know that that was possible, to be able to find somebody that would make you feel that comfortable. And I think in our case, I strongly suspect that Ian might be ADHD, and I think we know sort of anecdotally that autism and ADHD partners really get on well, and certainly in our case it's really worked. But I think in terms of any other unmasking, I don't know, I think it's perhaps trying to settle into your kind of first reaction to something, maybe. So being a bit more honest with yourself about how you want to kind of react to something, and, you know, maybe being a bit grumpier about stuff. Who knows, really. I think this is something that I'll certainly do another video on at some point, because there's just so much to discuss with it, really, and what it means, actually, because it means different things for all of us, doesn't it? I think the thing that I found the most helpful since my diagnosis this year has been the YouTube community. It's been just so brilliant and welcoming and just so friendly, and I wasn't expecting any of it, really. And I found autistic creators to be such an amazing resource, to be able to find out so much about autism, and particularly for those of us that kind of struggle to read a little bit. I'm mildly dyslexic, so it takes me forever to read a book, really. I'm not so bad with textbooks and stuff, it's just how the text is presented in a book really matters as to whether I'll be able to read it quickly or not. So to be able to learn from other autistic creators has been just so important and so powerful for me. And I just really respect how much autistic creators are putting into their channels, because it takes a lot of courage to make videos and to use your voice to talk about your experience or to educate others and to be an advocate for the community, really. It's not easy, and had I not already had a YouTube channel to practice on, really, I don't think I'd have set up a channel, and I wouldn't be doing this now. So I'm only here because I've been inspired by other autistic creators, and I'm just so thankful for all of their efforts and their time and their energy that they've put into their videos, because their content really matters. And I've really enjoyed making content for this channel. It's been, yeah, just so lovely to think that other people out there are watching my videos and connecting with them in some way, so that we can have a kind of shared experience, really. The best kind of comment for me is when somebody says, I haven't heard somebody talk about this in this way, or I haven't heard somebody talk about this specific thing, but what you've said here really resonates with me. So it's just lovely to think that we can all be represented in some way, that we can hear ourselves in other people's stories, really. And I'm just really excited to make more content, and I hope that I'm able to make content for as long as people want to see it, really. But anyway, to summarise, I think mainly I'm in a good place post-diagnosis. I've still a lot of stuff to go through, a lot of stuff to figure out, a lot of stuff to reframe, but I'm glad I'm on this journey, and I'm just so glad to have this information about myself, instead of beating myself up constantly about things I've done, things I can't do, things I want to do, but I'm just kind of limited somehow, and it just all makes sense, doesn't it? So above all, a massive thank you for all of you out there joining me on this journey. I'm just really grateful to know that so many people can relate to my stories, really. So that's going to be it for today. So thank you for watching. Give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.